I think the first thing I probably want to say is that it's not a given that climate change will, in and of itself, lead to climate change, to conflict, but rather there is a relationship, and whether or how the links between climate and conflict interact depends on a range of intermediary factors which determine the relationship between these two risks. And our role, and what we've tried to do in the topic guide, is to understand this relationship, looking at the literature and the evidence that's out there.
The reason that I think this topic guide is important is because it actually tries to present in quite a condensed way what is actually quite a complex and broad set of literature that's out there at the moment. As was said, there is a lot of evidence already that shows there is a link between climate change and conflict, but actually how we understand that is quite difficult. I think one thing that's important to bear in mind is that actually if we're serious about trying to reduce poverty, if we're serious about trying to support people to build resilience, we cannot do that unless we take seriously the links between climate change and conflict. And that's where I think this guide can help.
What we've seen from the topic guide and the discussion earlier is the risks are huge. We know as we look out over the next decade and then further that we can see big changes in the physical environment, and that could have huge knock-on effects for where people can live, whether people will have enough to eat, what will happen to global food markets. And so what we're worried about is conflict writ large, state failure, but we're worried about people essentially.
I mean, I think in the topic guide, we try and make the case that actually there is quite a lot that you can do. And a lot of that is about simply joining the dots between different communities of practice. So for example, at the moment, there is a lot of tools, handbooks, guidance notes out there that essentially try and help people to work in very difficult contexts, whether they're contexts that are affected by climate change or disasters or conflict and fragility and insecurity. The challenge we've got at the moment, though, is that those toolkits and guidance notes, they're all quite siloed. So you have people, for example, that are interested in climate using toolkits that help them integrate climate. You have people that are interested on conflict, using things like do no harm and conflict sensitivity. And actually what we need is we need to try and get different communities of practice working together more.
One thing that topic guide was really interesting was the scale and the breadth of the problem. And what I didn't appreciate before you did this piece of work was the massive amount of knock-on effects and the risks of climate change and conflict, and how it can affect so many different things and so many different people in so many different regions. Now that in itself, for me, screams this is important.
So one thing that we need to get better at doing, and which this topic guide I think will help us do, is to think about the way the future might look. We know that the future, when it comes to the climate, isn't going to resemble the past. And so for the Foreign Office, but also working with DFID on development cooperation programs, we need to bear in mind that the future might look different.
I think, like you say, this is an issue for a whole range of different departments, both within DFID and also within other departments across Whitehall, because it's a complex issue. Looking and trying to really understand and get to grips with the links between changes in climate and potential changes in both conflict and peace it's a really difficult thing to try and get a handle on. And I think, like you say, it's relevant for a number of people. It's relevant if you're trying to program climate change finance and you're trying to think about how can you support communities to adapt to climate change. You need to think about where is that climate aid going. Is it going into contexts that maybe in the past have had either issues with conflict or fragility, and how is that aid going to potentially sort of disrupt that?
I think another opportunity is bringing things down to the household level. And one of the issues that I have is that we're working very much on very kind of high level processes, or we're working with governments who are trying to manage huge countries. But actually we forget quite often what's going on at the household level. And that's basically where we want to see benefits and results and impact.
I think there are two key things for me. The one is, as you say, taking climate change and environmental risks out of the green box and putting it bang into the way that we understand the range of social development issues that we work with on a day-to-day basis. The second is moving from, when we're thinking about the links between climate and security, moving away from this almost obsession to try and prove causality, like conflict. Climate change causes conflict. We know that they are two risks that communities face or states face, and they interact. It's understanding those interactions and then being able to respond that we need to focus on now.
And for me, the two lessons for what we can do, one is accept that there's uncertainty and learn how to respond to uncertainty in a constructive way. We know that the change in climate is going to change some of the factors that affect people's livelihoods and conflict risks around the world. We know that there's a range of possibilities. We need to work with what we know about that range and not wait until we've got perfect information. Mm-hmm. And the second thing I'd say is a lot of this is about building resilience. A lot of this is about making sure that our programs and policies are forward-looking and that we understand how things might change and affect them in the future. There's an opportunity here as well, because as we improve our understanding of how climate and climate impacts will affect our programs and our policies, that actually makes quite a powerful case for reducing emissions in the future as well.